the term inhibitor. So let's first define what is an inhibitor. An inhibitor is actually a substance that binds to an enzyme and reduces its catalytic activity. So it actually does uh, harm in harm instead of good. So it is the catalytic activity, syempre, it's important for both cellular regulation and not just for cellular regulation, but also for to combat drugs and toxins. So an inhibitor, it can be natural components of the cell, so it can be used to control metabolic processes, or they can be like foreign substances like medicines. So pwede siya medicine, but we also have actually a term for if it does good to the body. So later I'll introduce that to you. And it can be a medicine or a poison to the body. And they can work by either binding to the enzyme's active site or another site. So I'll be introducing this site to you, which changes the enzyme structure and as well as their function. So as you can see here, we have the of types of enzyme inhibitors. So daghan kay as mali-mali na ang iyang placing. So we have the reversible inhibitors and irreversible inhibitors. For the reversible inhibitors, so we'll be discussing a little bit of uncompetitive and we'll be highlighting competitive and non-competitive. So basically, mix, it's a mix of your competitive and non-competitive. So let's take a look at first before we go to the discussion of the reversible inhibitors. I'll introduce to you, so where do inhibitors bind? So this is the site of action. We call this the allosteric site. So it's a different spot. So it's not the active site. So it is where another molecule can attach. So that another molecule can be an inhibitor. So when it binds, it actually changes so as you can see here, the allosteric site. So you have your inhibitor and it's going to bind to your enzyme. So when it binds, it changes the enzyme's shape, which can either turn the enzyme on or off. So that means pwede niya ma-stop ang activity or continue with the activity. So it can either do good or do harm. So this helps the cell control enzyme activity without blocking where the real substrate goes, because our substrate can still bind at the active site, but this will, the inhibitor can change the conformation. So now it can either function well or completely stop the function of the enzyme. And most of the diseases are, or when there is an inhibitor that is introduced in our body, so generally they actually cause harm or they can eventually lead to dysfunctions or diseases that are present in your body due to stopping the metabolic process. So this can actually have a big effect in metabolism. So we have here a comparison of what is a reversible in comparison to an irreversible inhibition. So for a reversible inhibition, so it's like putting a temporary lock on an enzyme. So the inhibitor, it sticks to an enzyme using weak forces, but it can let go again. Once the inhibitor is gone, the enzyme goes back to normal and it can keep working. Whereas if you have a reversible inhibition, it's like gluing the lock shut. So what happens? The inhibitor attaches permanently or very tightly to the enzyme, stopping it for good. So the only way to make the reaction happen again is to produce new enzyme molecule. So, ano na siya, non-functional na ang inyong enzyme. So let's take a look at what do we mean by we say reversible competitive inhibition. For competitive inhibitors, they act like lookalikes of the real substrate as we can see here. So siya ang nagfit diri sa it actually races with the substrate. So they have a similar shape or charge and they can fit into the active site. So kani siya, this is the active site where the substrate actually goes to. So this blocks the enzyme temporarily, but if you add more substrate, it can push the inhibitor out from this active site. Okay, so there is a competitive inhibition. Take note that nag-compete sila for the active site. So dili pa dire ma-apply si allosteric site. So for your non-competitive or reversible non-competitive inhibition, it actually works differently. So they don't go to the active site, instead they attach to the allosteric site. So that's somewhere else or somewhere else on the enzyme. So we call that the allosteric site. So as you can see here, the image. So what does this actually, or how does this influence the enzyme? This changes the enzyme's shape. So even if the substrate fits, the enzyme can't do its job properly. So it's like someone bending the lock. So even if the right key no longer works. So as you can see, the change in the shape, the substrate can no longer fit on the active side due to this influence of the non-competitive inhibitor through the conformational change of the enzyme. So that's how the non-competitive inhibition happens. So now let us briefly discuss what is uncompetitive inhibition. So this actually happens when the inhibitor only binds to the enzyme substrate complex. So here we have that